Welcome to Radio U.S. The political landscape in the United States has long been punctuated by bold, sometimes controversial proposals, and few proposals have generated as much discussion as those concerning Middle Eastern policy. Recently, during an interview on Fox News on February 21st, Donald Trump made a statement regarding a plan to control the Gaza Strip and relocate over 2 million Palestinians. His remark, "I think that's a really effective plan, but I'm not forcing it. I'm just sitting back and proposing it," serves as the foundation for a broader examination of his approach to international policy, his political style, and the potential ramifications for U.S. foreign relations. In this news section, we'll analyze the context in which Trump's statement was made, explore the underlying rationale and strategic implications, and assess the potential outcomes of such a proposal. Throughout this analysis, we will reflect on the nature of leadership that prefers proposing ideas rather than imposing them, and we will situate this discussion within the broader discourse on U.S. involvement in Middle Eastern affairs. At one point during a recent Trump news conference, Trump's casual yet assertive tone underscored a commitment to presenting ideas without immediate coercion, a characteristic that continues to define his political persona. Donald Trump's tenure in American politics has been marked by unconventional policy suggestions and a distinctive communication style. Throughout his previous administration, and even in the subsequent period, Trump has frequently employed provocative rhetoric to sway public opinion and energize his base. His approach to international affairs, particularly in regions marked by long-standing conflicts, has been no different. The Gaza Strip, a small but highly contentious territory along the Mediterranean coast, has historically been a flashpoint in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and any proposal related to its governance inevitably attracts intense scrutiny. In recent interviews, Trump has revisited his ideas on reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. The specific proposal referenced in his recent statement involves a plan in which the United States might assume a more active role in managing Gaza, specifically by overseeing its governance and suggesting the relocation of its population. While Trump clarified that he does not intend to force this plan on anyone, his choice of words, emphasizing the plan's efficacy yet non-coerciveness, reveals a belief in the power of ideas over mandates. This method of proposing rather than imposing policy measures aligns with Trump's overall philosophy. His communication style often hinges on assertive suggestions, leaving implementation in the hands of allies or partners, while positioning himself as a visionary leader. Such an approach is reminiscent of his earlier political maneuvers, where he would outline grand ideas in interviews and rallies, leaving the practical details to be worked out by his administration or supporters. Indeed, during one memorable Trump news conference, he reiterated the value of proposals over direct intervention, a sentiment that appears to be a recurring theme in his discourse. Moreover, Trump's approach must be understood against the backdrop of U.S. foreign policy debates that have intensified over the past few decades. Since the end of the Cold War, American administrations have oscillated between direct military intervention and more subtle forms of diplomatic engagement in the Middle East. The balance between these approaches has often depended on domestic political considerations as much as on international strategic interests. Trump's statement in this context can be seen as an attempt to strike a middle ground. He presents an idea he deems effective without immediately triggering the resistance that might arise from a more forceful imposition. Analyzing the statement, effective but not forced. At the heart of Trump's remark lies a dichotomy between efficacy and coercion. On one hand, he asserts that the plan is really effective, implying that, if implemented, it would yield positive results. On the other hand, he emphasizes that he is not forcing it, but rather just sitting back and proposing the idea. This duality invites several layers of interpretation. First, the claim of effectiveness suggests that Trump has confidence in the underlying logic of the plan. For proponents, the idea of a controlled transition in Gaza might promise stability, order, and perhaps even economic revitalization by repurposing the territory in a manner akin to other successful urban or regional redevelopment projects. To some, the notion of transforming Gaza into a controlled zone managed by external powers, even if temporarily, could be seen as a pragmatic solution to a long-standing conflict. However, the idea of relocating more than 2 million people is fraught with humanitarian, legal, and political challenges. The relocation of entire populations has deep historical connotations and has often resulted in protracted crises. Trump's decision to frame the proposal as just a suggestion seems designed to sidestep immediate criticism. By not directly imposing the plan, he avoids the label of authoritarianism, a charge that has dogged him in the past, and instead positions himself as a creative problem solver who merely offers an alternative pathway for discussion. Furthermore, the statement raises questions about the role of persuasion versus coercion in policymaking. In modern democratic systems, policy proposals are typically subject to rigorous debate and require broad consensus before implementation. Trump's remark, therefore, can be interpreted as a challenge to the conventional modes of policy formulation. He appears to be saying that if an idea is good enough, it should speak for itself, regardless of whether it is implemented immediately. In doing so, he also distances himself from the burdens of enforcement and operational management, hinting that his primary role is to generate ideas and stimulate debate. This perspective invites a broader discussion on the nature of leadership. Leaders who favor proposing ideas rather than directly imposing them often rely on the power of persuasion. They trust that if their ideas resonate with the public or with influential stakeholders, those ideas will eventually be adopted. Critics, however, argue that such an approach can lead to ambiguity and inaction, particularly in situations where decisive action is needed. In the context of the Gaza proposal, the lack of an immediate enforcement mechanism might be seen as both a strength, preserving diplomatic flexibility, and a weakness, as it leaves the plan's actual implementation uncertain. In debates over U.S. foreign policy, there is often a tension between idealism and realism. Trump's statement can be read as a blend of both. On the one hand, the idea of a really effective plan carries an element of idealism, an appeal to what could be achieved under optimal conditions. On the other hand, by choosing not to force the plan, Trump acknowledges the complex realities on the ground and the myriad stakeholders who have a vested interest in the status quo. This pragmatic nuance is critical in understanding the statement's full import. During another instance, a recent session that resembled a formal Trump news conference, the discussion of his proposals was met with mixed reactions. Supporters lauded his innovative approach, while critics argued that the vagueness inherent in proposing rather than acting might delay necessary reforms. Such debates underscore the broader political dilemma: how to balance bold vision with responsible governance, especially when dealing with issues as sensitive as population displacement and territorial control. The implications of Trump's proposal, if it were ever to move beyond the realm of discussion, are vast. For the United States, a plan that involves overseeing or managing a territory like Gaza could signal a significant shift in its approach to the Middle East, a region where intervention has historically been both a source of strategic advantage and a cause of international controversy. Politically, embracing such a plan would require navigating a labyrinth of international law, diplomatic sensitivities, and human rights considerations. Any attempt to control a territory and influence the demographic composition of its population is likely to spark fierce opposition from Palestinian leaders, regional actors, and international organizations. The prospect of relocating over 2 million people raises ethical questions and could be seen as a modern echo of colonial practices, an accusation that would undoubtedly inflame tensions both domestically and abroad. At the same time, proponents might argue that a controlled and managed transition in Gaza could pave the way for a more stable regional order. They could suggest that a well-planned initiative, free from the traditional constraints of immediate coercion, might offer a path toward eventual peace negotiations. In such a scenario, the United States would play a mediating role, not by imposing its will, but by proposing a framework that encourages dialogue and incremental change. Yet the risks remain high. The history of population transfers and forced relocations is replete with examples of unintended consequences, including prolonged humanitarian crises and increased regional instability. Critics of the proposal are likely to argue that the potential benefits do not justify the risks associated with disrupting the lives of millions of people. Moreover, any move towards such a policy could further polarize domestic opinion in the United States, where debates over interventionism and humanitarian responsibility continue to be deeply divisive. This proposal also needs to be seen in light of Trump's overall foreign policy narrative. His administration has often prioritized a transactional view of international relations, where deals and proposals are weighed primarily in terms of their direct benefits to American interests. The Gaza plan, as outlined in his statement, seems to reflect this mindset. By emphasizing that he is not forcing the plan, Trump is positioning himself as an innovator who offers alternatives rather than dictating terms. This approach could be appealing to segments of the American public that favor a less interventionist foreign policy while still seeking strong leadership on the global stage. The broader implications for U.S. relations in the Middle East are complex. On one hand, a policy of proposing, rather than imposing, might open new avenues for negotiation and engagement with regional partners. On the other hand, the very idea of externally managing a territory like Gaza could be interpreted as an overreach that undermines the sovereignty and self-determination of the Palestinian people. This tension between intervention and respect for national autonomy lies at the heart of many contemporary foreign policy debates. In light of these challenges, it is important to consider how the proposal might be received by various international actors. Israel, for example, has its own long-standing interests in the stability and security of the Gaza Strip, and any shift in U.S. policy would have to be carefully coordinated with Israeli leadership. Similarly, Arab nations and Palestinian representatives are likely to view the proposal with deep skepticism. The balance between addressing security concerns and upholding human rights and self-determination is delicate, and any misstep could have far-reaching consequences. There is also the domestic political dimension to consider. Trump's approach, marked by the style of proposing ideas rather than enforcing them, has long resonated with his core supporters. His rhetoric, often delivered in impromptu remarks or at events resembling a formal Trump news conference, has consistently emphasized a return to American greatness through bold initiatives. However, Critics argue that such proposals can be more symbolic than substantive, serving primarily as rallying points rather than practical policy solutions. The debate over the Gaza proposal is likely to follow a similar pattern, with supporters hailing it as visionary and detractors dismissing it as impractical or even dangerous. A key element in understanding Trump's statement lies in the distinction between persuasion and coercion in leadership. Trump's repeated insistence that he is just proposing rather than forcing the plan suggests a deliberate distancing from authoritarian methods. By presenting his ideas as proposals open to discussion, he frames himself as a leader who respects the democratic process, even as he challenges conventional norms of policymaking. In many ways, this approach reflects a broader trend in contemporary politics, where leaders use the power of suggestion to influence both public opinion and policy debates. Instead of deploying the full weight of government power immediately, such leaders rely on the force of ideas. They trust that if an idea is compelling enough, it will eventually gain traction and be implemented through a combination of public support and political negotiation. This method is not without its risks, however. The reliance on persuasion over direct action can lead to ambiguity and delays in decision-making. In crisis situations, the need for swift, decisive action is paramount, and the luxury of open-ended proposals may prove inadequate. Yet, in the context of long-term strategic planning, particularly in areas as complex as the Middle East, the ability to propose radical alternatives without immediate enforcement can sometimes be an asset. Indeed, one can recall an instance during a previous Trump news conference when Trump reiterated his commitment to presenting transformative ideas. At that time, he argued that America's strength lies not just in its military might, but in its capacity to innovate and propose bold solutions. This philosophy underpins the current Gaza proposal, a belief that the mere act of proposing an alternative can shift the terms of debate and open up new possibilities for international engagement. Furthermore, the style of proposing rather than imposing resonates with a segment of the electorate that is wary of bureaucratic overreach and heavy-handed foreign interventions. For these voters, Trump's approach represents a return to a more America First policy, where ideas are allowed to flourish without the immediate burden of execution. However, this very ambiguity also leaves room for misinterpretation and criticism, as opponents can argue that the lack of a clear implementation strategy undermines the credibility of the proposal. The tension between vision and execution is a recurring theme in political discourse. Leaders who are adept at generating innovative ideas sometimes struggle with the practical challenges of turning those ideas into reality. In the case of the Gaza proposal, Trump's emphasis on the plan's potential effectiveness is counterbalanced by the uncertainty surrounding its actual implementation. This ambiguity serves as both a shield and a vulnerability. A shield in that it protects the proposal from immediate backlash, and a vulnerability because it leaves critics free to dismiss it as mere rhetoric. Looking ahead, the future of the Gaza proposal remains uncertain. Should the idea gain momentum among key policymakers, it might eventually be fleshed out through diplomatic negotiations and incremental reforms. In such a scenario, the United States could assume a more active role in mediating between conflicting parties, proposing a phased approach to regional stabilization. The proposal might begin with limited interventions aimed at improving governance and economic conditions in Gaza, gradually expanding into broader efforts to restructure the region's political landscape. Conversely, if the proposal remains merely a subject of discussion without concrete follow-through, it risks being relegated to the realm of political rhetoric, a bold idea that failed to materialize into actionable policy. In this case, the proposal might serve as a talking point for Trump's supporters, a symbol of his alternative vision for America's role in the world, without producing any tangible changes on the ground. Either outcome carries significant implications for U.S. foreign policy. A successful implementation of the proposal, however limited its scope may be initially, could herald a new era of American engagement in the Middle East, one characterized by creative, if controversial, approaches to conflict resolution. On the other hand, failure to advance the proposal might reinforce existing perceptions of American retrenchment and isolationism, particularly among allies who have long depended on U.S. leadership in global affairs. One of the challenges facing any proposal of this magnitude is the inherent unpredictability of international politics. The Gaza Strip is not merely a geographic entity, but a symbol of deep-seated historical, cultural, and political conflicts. Any attempt to reconfigure its governance and demographic composition is likely to provoke strong reactions from multiple quarters. Regional powers such as Israel, Egypt, and Jordan, as well as international bodies like the United Nations, would undoubtedly scrutinize the proposal closely. The reaction of Palestinian leadership, in particular, would be a decisive factor in determining whether the idea could ever move beyond the drawing board. Within the United States, the debate over the proposal is likely to be equally contentious. The American public remains divided on issues related to intervention and nation-building, and any policy that involves significant foreign engagement is bound to stir controversy. Trump's strategy of proposing, rather than enforcing, may be well received by those who value a more measured, consultative approach, but it will also face fierce opposition from critics who demand clear, actionable policies. The electoral implications are significant, as foreign policy debates have often played a decisive role in shaping voter perceptions and influencing election outcomes. It is also worth considering how the proposal fits within the broader framework of Trump's political legacy. His administration was characterized by a penchant for high-profile, headline-grabbing initiatives that often blurred the lines between domestic and international policy. Whether it was the renegotiation of trade deals or the controversial approach to immigration, Trump's policy style was marked by an emphasis on bold ideas rather than gradual reforms. The Gaza proposal, with its emphasis on the potential for effectiveness without coercion, is a natural extension of that legacy. In this sense, the proposal can be seen as both a continuation of and a departure from traditional U.S. foreign policy. It challenges the conventional wisdom of heavy-handed intervention, while also demanding a level of visionary thinking that has often been absent from the diplomatic establishment. The balancing act required to implement such a proposal is formidable. It would necessitate careful coordination among domestic policymakers, international partners, and regional stakeholders. Even if the proposal were ultimately adopted in some form, its success would depend on the ability of the United States to navigate these complex relationships without alienating key allies or exacerbating existing conflicts. In conclusion, Donald Trump's recent statement, "I think that's a really effective plan, but I'm not forcing it. I'm just sitting back and proposing it," serves as a lens through which to examine both his unique approach to leadership and the broader challenges facing U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. The proposal to control Gaza and relocate over 2 million Palestinians is emblematic of Trump's willingness to entertain bold, unconventional ideas, even as it underscores the inherent risks of proposing solutions without clear mechanisms for implementation. The analysis presented here has explored the multifaceted dimensions of the proposal. On one level, it reflects a confidence in the power of ideas, a belief that a well-conceived plan, if given time to take root, can transform even the most intractable conflicts. On another level, however, it raises profound ethical and practical questions about the use of force, the respect for national sovereignty, and the responsibilities of a global superpower. As the debate over the proposal unfolds, it will serve as a reminder of the delicate balance between vision and pragmatism in policy making. The future of this proposal remains uncertain. It may eventually lead to a reimagining of American involvement in the Middle East, a process marked by negotiation, gradual reform, and perhaps the hope of long-sought stability. Alternatively, if it remains nothing more than a provocative idea, it will have joined the long list of ambitious proposals that, while stirring public debate, ultimately failed to materialize. Regardless of the outcome, Trump's approach of proposing rather than enforcing ideas represents a distinctive strain of political thought, one that challenges conventional modes of governance and redefines the contours of leadership. In reflecting on these issues, one cannot help but recall that moments of political transformation are often preceded by bold, if contentious, ideas. While many questions remain about the feasibility and morality of the proposed plan for Gaza, the discussion it has sparked is itself significant. It forces policymakers, analysts, and the public alike to reconsider the nature of power, the responsibilities of leadership, and the potential for creative solutions in the face of seemingly intractable challenges. As the world watches, the echoes of this proposal and the debates it inspires may well shape the future trajectory of U.S. foreign policy. Ultimately, the true measure of any proposal lies not only in its theoretical merits, but also in its ability to be translated into action. Whether or not Trump's idea will ever move beyond the realm of discussion remains to be seen. What is clear, however, is that his method of proposing rather than forcing a plan, an approach sometimes highlighted during a previous instance at a Trump news conference, continues to provoke debate about the best ways to achieve meaningful change in an increasingly complex global environment. In the coming months and years, as new challenges arise and the international community grapples with long-standing conflicts, the lessons drawn from this episode will undoubtedly inform both public discourse and policy decisions. In sum, Trump's statement encapsulates a dual vision, one that is optimistic about the transformative power of innovative ideas, yet cautious about the risks of coercive intervention. It is a vision that appeals to those who believe in the potential of leadership to shape the future through bold proposals, even as it invites critical scrutiny from those who question the practicalities of such an approach. The ongoing discussion, and the debates it will continue to ignite, remind us that in the realm of international politics, the interplay between idea and implementation is as crucial as it is complex. This analysis, spanning historical context, strategic implications, and the inherent challenges of large-scale proposals, offers a comprehensive examination of one of the most provocative ideas to emerge from recent U.S. political discourse. With its emphasis on proposing rather than imposing policy measures, the statement reflects not only Trump's personal style, but also a broader debate about the future of U.S. engagement in global conflicts. As discussions evolve and policymakers weigh the merits of such proposals, it is clear that this episode, like many before it, will leave an indelible mark on the trajectory of international relations. Thank you for tuning in to RadioU.S. We appreciate your support. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting updates and content. Stay connected and stay informed.